And here they come.
So coming. Hey everyone, thank you guys so much for coming. We're still trying to work out some technical difficulties with some of our panelists. Zoom is the bane of my existence personally, but we appreciate you coming so much. And if you would just give us a few seconds and we will get started.
Okay, we got Matt up. Do we happen to know if
I think that's all of our panelists, John.
is Madison?
Actually, I don't think it is.
Sydney Grace. I'm trying to find Madison Broussard.
She's in.
She's already on here.
Oh, there she is. Okay. So is that everybody? I think it is.
I believe it is.
I will shut up and let y'all do your thing.
Awesome. Well, I will kick us off. Once again, thank you everybody for coming. This panel was put on by UT's Ad Club and PRSSA organization. So we're super excited. We've got some absolutely wonderful speakers from a lot of different places. And to start off, I'm going to let them introduce you to let them introduce themselves to you. So Armando, do you want to kick us off?
Sure, I can then just kind of popcorn to someone else, I guess.
That's perfect.
But my name is Armando Sanchez Monsivais. I am an account executive at Amazon Ads in the large customer sales organization. I'm really excited to be talking to you all today, and thank you for having me. We can go to Stephen.
Hi everyone, I'm Stephen Woods. I work as a manager in paid social at Reprise Digital, which is a social and search agency. Yeah, I graduated UT in 2016, so I was in your spot not too long ago, and really excited for today, and go Vols. And I'll pass it to Madison since she's on my screen.
Hi, y'all. I'm Madison Broussard. I am a digital marketing manager at Red Light Management in Nashville. I went to Alabama, but I'm originally from Knoxville. And yeah, I'm excited to be here too. I'll pass it to Rebecca.
Hi guys, my name is Rebecca Nagnez. I'm a community manager for the social strategy team at Pereira Odell, the ad agency, and me and Kate actually work at the same agency together. We had our internship together this summer, so it's nice to meet everyone.
Good.
And I will go ahead and pass it to Matt.
Thank you. Hey everybody, I'm Matt Cleary. I work at a place I'm sure none of you have heard of, TikTok. I lead our retail and e-commerce teams in terms of brand partnerships. Graduated Tennessee in 2008 and excited to talk with you all.
Awesome, perfect. And I guess I should have introduced myself. That was my bad. My name is Kate Hartman. I'm a senior and an advertising major at UT. So we're so excited. And the way we're going to do this is I'm going to start asking some questions and I'll get us rolling. Everyone can answer. Somebody can step up. Feel free. If the question interests you, go for it. If it doesn't, somebody else can answer it. And then everyone else who's a participant, feel free to pop questions in the chat. And I will keep an eye out and we'll make sure we get to all of them. So the first question is, obviously this is social media week, but in advertising and public relations, not everything revolves around social media and not everybody starts in social media. So we're all curious, how did you find yourself where you're at today in the industry? Did you start in social? Did you always want to do social? Or is it something that you just happened to fall into, or do you not do social at all? Anyone want to go?
Yeah, I can kick off. So
Perfect. Thank you, Matt.
no problem. So when I was graduating from Tennessee, social was really just Facebook. And so I was, and at the time, I don't think anyone had the idea that Facebook would become such a powerful player in the advertising space. It was in fact, like most ad agencies at the time weren't hiring digital specific or social specific folks. So I was desperate to get into any form of advertising and interviewed everywhere from an out-of-home agency to ultimately the media agency that hired me. And they hired me at the time at a hybrid role. So it was part traditional media, TV, print, and part digital. And I think for the first year, I still did 90% print and digital until they hired someone as a digital director who said, who wants to learn digital media and all that comes into it? And I raised my hand thinking, I think it's going to be something. And luckily it was. And from there, I was able to, I think, find myself in other positions and in other jobs, all within the digital space. And then eventually found my way to Twitter, where I learned the power of social and the power of platform is something special. And that's how I've, where I've stuck since.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I feel like that's like one major difference today. I mean, I'm in the process of looking for jobs, and all you see anywhere is digital marketing manager, digital social manager, social media planner. So it's definitely a different world.
I can go. I originally started out kind of in more of the PR field, similar to probably how a lot of y'all are, being in like the ad club and PRSSA, but I knew that social was probably going to be a very big factor. I should also say that I graduated in 2017, so not too far off, but I knew that social was going to be a big playing factor in marketing, and knew I wanted to get into entertainment marketing, and kind of had a feel for social media through a couple of internships, and handled a lot of content marketing at larger corporations. So on the flip side, I kind of did leave college looking for some of those jobs and saw how prevalent it was becoming because of how many were available, similar to what you're saying, Kate. I mean, now it's even more narrowly focused and you see even more of those. But yeah, on the flip side, even just within a few years, it's changed a lot.
Yeah, that it has. Anyone else? Because if not, we can keep going.
I can kind of.
Oh, go ahead.
Perfect. Then we'll just go through everyone.
Rebecca, you go first.
Sure. Yeah, I was just going to say that when I was in school, I had never intended on focusing solely on social media. Just while I was earning my comm degree, all of my classes I were noticing were leaning heavily towards digital marketing. And it was something that I was really starting to see emerge more prevalent than any other type of marketing that we were studying. So yeah, I just sort of, kind of fell into it and ended up here.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think my college journey kind of dipped its toes into social. I feel like I'm the only or one of the people here that is not currently in social or at a social media company. So when I was in college, and I did not kind of give this introduction part yet, but I went to the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and I graduated in 2019, so just 2 years ago, in advertising and informatics. And when I was in college for about 2 years, I actually did social media internships in college, and it taught me a lot of valuable skills, and worked across different platforms for like smaller brands or local businesses around the college community. But what I found for me is that I really liked being able to be like more hands-on with the client, and then be a little bit more hands-on with the actual strategy that goes behind the brand. And so I started looking for roles at agencies and brand strategy, or like account executive roles. I found that there were opportunities at tech companies, so Amazon being one of them, where it's kind of like a hybrid role, almost like consulting, where I get to help brands grow through our advertising efforts and be their strategic partner along in that journey. But a lot of the skills that I learned through those social media internships very early on are directly applicable. And I think that each one helped to be a stepping stone, and whether or not I would have pursued that path, like it still would have been great. And so it's definitely kind of permeating everywhere. I think that, as you know, like social media is just huge, and it is a large factor in terms of how a lot of brands make their decisions and get their marketing and advertising efforts out there.
Cool. And I'll round out the conversation. So yeah, my first exposure to social media was Dr. Childers' social media class, where we talked about, I think it was when Beyonce performed at the Super Bowl, and there was a whole Red Lobster incident. I know that's dating us, Dr. Childers, but that was our first kind of exposure to social from an advertising perspective and how brands talk about social. When I started my career, it was similar to Matt's actually, where I started a media agency, where I worked on, it was like a hybrid role as well, where it was part traditional, so like print out of home ads, as well as digital, and not social at all, actually. It wasn't until my second job where I worked on Energizer was my client at the time, where I was just like talking to the social team that works with the planning team at the time. And I was like, can you just teach me like what you guys do? And ever since then, I've kind of went in that direction with my career. And so, yeah, now I'm like a social manager or something, which is kind of crazy because it's only been like a few years. But I will say it's definitely an interesting part of the industry because it is always changing. And it just resonates with me because like I'm always on, you know, Facebook, Instagram all day, Snapchat, TikTok. So it's easy when I'm in like client conversations to talk about it since we're already using it every day. Whereas like, not to just like programmatic, like digital media, but it's kind of hard to talk about sometimes because it's like kind of more complicated. But that is like one thing I really liked about working in social is it is very like personable and kind of easy to communicate and understand.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. So now that we've heard about how you work in social or how you don't, in what capacity do you use social on like a day-to-day basis? Or when do you not use it? And if so, like what platforms and channels are more beneficial than social?
I can go since I was just speaking. I work completely in social. I would say the channels that most of the accounts I've worked on is Facebook, Instagram, just because of the scale of how everyone uses it. Everyone's on it. They cover all demographics. I mean, they're definitely controversial, and some advertisers are starting to diversify their media outside of Facebook, Instagram, but that is kind of where I've seen the majority of ad dollars go. In my career, I know it's shifting a little bit. Matt, I don't know if they're going to TikTok, but hopefully
Yeah, together we
we'll
can get
send it
them
your
to.
way.
Yeah.
But in addition to Facebook, Instagram, I would say Twitter is another big platform, as well as Snapchat and Pinterest are like the four big ones that I've run on in the past. Also LinkedIn I've worked on before. But yeah, for social, there's also like Reddit, TikTok, there's a few others out there that have advertising capabilities. So I would say if you're like trying to work in this industry, it's really good to educate. I would say each platform offers their own trainings on how to plan and buy media on these platforms. So that'd be my advice, would be if you want to work at like a paid social role, and you're trying to get that first job, which is always the hardest, they have like certification courses you can take that would make you stand out above everyone else to show that you know how to plan and buy on these platforms. But yeah, I'll pass it to you, Matt.
No, I would agree. I think that's a great call out too, Stephen, is that every one of these platforms has a self-service offering and a training course and best practices. And it's really easy to find if you just search, the company and essentially ads, and you can find not just a library of examples and case studies, but also best practices and even modular courses. I think for me, like, yeah, look, I'm not going to say that I'm on TikTok all day. Like, I'm sure my company would like it if I was, but it's definitely addicting and a place where I find myself. I think one that I find is like really, really helpful just in terms of the breadth of information is Twitter. The reality is, like, Twitter is as real time as it gets. I mean, whether you're following the news or if it's happening in the world, it's happening on Twitter at some capacity. I think like a lot of other platforms have that. I just don't know if it has the same conversation that does. And what I think is really interesting, and I challenge our teams to do a lot is see how brands engage, how they interact, how they show up there. When I was at Twitter, we always said like Twitter is the place where your brand gets to define its voice, and some brands, really lean into that. Some brands shy away from that, but it's a really interesting, because it being a character first and a limited resource, like in terms of how creative you can be. It's a fun exercise to see how brands are thinking about expressing themselves, but you also see what conversations brands get into, what conversations brands stay away from. And I think it's a really good idea to like just check brands that you're interested in, brands you're working with, companies you're interested in. That is essentially their way to put out information and almost humanize their brand in many ways. So I think Twitter is incredibly interesting from that capacity. But obviously, TikTok is an area that I spend a lot of time as well as all the others. I think they all have their own unique purpose. It's not one or the other. It's one, they all kind of do something uniquely different and special from the other.
Yeah, I was just gonna say to Stephen and Matt's point, I remember doing those certifications for Facebook. I think it's called Facebook Blueprint and stuff like that whenever I was interviewing places and put it on my resume. And that was multiple people that interviewed me said that was like key to me getting that interview and getting job offers. But to Kate's question, I really work in social nonstop all day, every day. My job is managing the digital marketing strategy for a variety of our artists and bands that we work for. So that's working on the organic side and sometimes also on the paid side, depending on the campaign. And that's developing content ideas, getting the content, coming up with the posting strategy, and actually executing it, reporting on it, engaging on all the platforms. And social is really important for an artist's career. It actually can determine a lot of other factors. Their engagement rate can determine any sort of brand opportunities that they get, partnerships. It can determine what slot they get in a festival. It can determine if they get that support spot for a major tour. So it's extremely important in my job, and it's extremely important for these artists' careers. But as we all know, with the rise of using music and short form video content, TikTok and Instagram have become like vitally important. So I would say that those are the two that we've been leaning into a little bit more for each of my artist projects, but it's different on a case by case basis. Someone that is a little bit more of like a legacy act, that may not be authentic to them. So we really lean into their audience on Facebook, whereas someone that we ended up signing because they were a TikTok star, we're leaning into TikTok. So it really is different. And my biggest advice would be to take the opportunity to take those courses that you see provided by each of the platforms, and also just subscribe to like their business newsletters. There's one for music and TikTok, there's one for music and Facebook, there's one for music and Twitter, and just familiarize yourself with all of the new tools that are coming out. You can even do that from a user standpoint by following like @creators or @Instagram or like they post all of the updates. So continuing your education just on like all the tools that come up, because without a doubt, you will definitely touch every single platform at some point.
Yeah, I think the trainings and the certifications are extremely handy. I would echo kind of both of those points. I think So I don't use social too much in terms of my day-to-day job, but I'm kind of thinking about it like just as an advertising professional, how I keep track of things. And I think one, um, trend that I've been seeing that I think is particularly interesting is the difference between synchronous and asynchronous social that's going on soon. So like synchronous is like when things are happening in real time. So that's like Twitch, that's like YouTube gaming, that's like the Twitter spaces that just like started popping up a little bit more frequently. Right now, I've been seeing a lot of brands trying to engage more with their customers and with their brands in these synchronous spaces that are really popular for being able to engage with talent, being able to engage with music. Like I know on Twitch, for example, gaming is extremely popular, but they have like the lifestyle trends now. They have, people being able, musical artists being able to put on like virtual concerts and things like that, like just more ways to interact in real time. And then I think as well, like a lot of the social that I've been seeing in more asynchronous ways, being that the media stays once it's posted, is that people are using social also just for like research and cataloging. Like that's why communities like Twitter and Reddit and YouTube even exist so much, because they are their own search engines. Like people just look for information there. TikTok is the same way, actually. Like there's literally career pages and advertising support pages on TikTok too for those reasons. So I think that those types of trends have been really interesting as well. It's not just connecting with people anymore, but it's really building out these almost like Wikipedia-like spaces for additional resources for people, both live and things that stay.
I can go ahead. So for my role as a community manager, I am on social all day, every day, similar to Madison. And yeah, I think that each channel is, valuable in its own right. And like so many of the other panelists have said, it kind of just depends on the kind of content that you're putting out in the audience that you want to reach, because each channel is, tailored to a different kind of audience. So yeah, I think in my role as community manager, I'm definitely more on the engagement aspect. We're kind of like on the front lines as far as, answering, responding to the engagement that we see coming in on the different channels. And, that can be a lot of fun because it's something that we're seeing in real time as it comes in. And it's also really helpful in terms of social planning. So I work on one account strictly in community management, and then on another account strictly in social strategy. And so it's nice to take, what you see as in engagement and community management and translate it into social strategy and planning, upcoming content and things like that. So yeah.
Awesome. That was really very helpful, very insightful. So obviously social media is super important, and your answers don't have to pertain to your actual job, but as like professionals in the industry, in what ways do you guys see social media continuing to like evolve in the next few years? Like, where do you think it's going to go? Do you think it's going to keep changing significantly? Because I mean, I remember hearing like in high school and middle school when TikTok came out and Vine went away, which was forever ago, everyone kept talking about how Facebook is finally going to Facebook is going to start to die down. And I definitely think personally they still cater to an older audience, but they're definitely still up and running. So what do you guys think?
I can go because this is very top of mind. We had a call about this today with Facebook. Social is just, it's wild how rapidly it's changing to almost be like a person-to-person continuous point of contact through like entire different universe. Facebook is working on launching the Metaverse, which some of you may have heard of. It's basically going to be, this whole new universe. You can go in and interact with brands or interact with artists. You can watch live music. You can do all this stuff. So I think that social is going to change a little bit from, it's not even one-way communication now, as I'm sure that like within your engagement, but it's going to become more continuous, where you're entering a universe and talking with people and shopping through that experience, where you're actually feeling like you're in it, rather than, hey, what are we posting about this campaign, or how are we running our ads to help push sales or something like that. It's going to become more of a like continuous thing where you're fully immersed, or that's what I'm seeing.
I definitely agree. I feel like I hear the word metaverse come up in a conversation at work at least once a week. Hey, Matt, are you talking? Because if so, you're muted.
I am. I do that far too often. I would say I completely agree, Madison. I think the idea is, I think the term and the delineation between what is social media and isn't social media is going to, just continue to get blurrier, right? The reality is, if you look at, and every one of these platforms, ours included, is trying to distinguish itself as, hey, we're not social media. TikTok is an entertainment company. Snapchat is a camera company or a messaging company. Facebook is creating, now they're a metaverse company. Twitter is an information company. So I think the reality is, the idea of like what was once deemed social is, and every other company is trying to add in, and every other platform, or trying to find ways to make their environment stickier. And a lot of those are by using social-esque tools, and whether that's, brands, websites incorporating social aspects to create a stickier experience. The idea that is, I think everything is going to be pretty ubiquitous, and you're going to find that platforms that understand like how to create experiences within their environment will be really successful. Like obviously what Meta is trying to do is create a universe where you can do everything you would want in its world. I think everyone's trying to think about how they can build their own ecosystem, and it's not just, I might have gone to an app for one reason. I mean, Amazon's another great example. It's not, Amazon isn't just shopping, it's Prime Video, it's Twitch, it's Audible, it has all these different aspects, and you can do so much. I think that's what what was once social pulled you there, gave you a reason to stay, and now try and reduce friction for all aspects of your life. So I think you'll just continue to see that with the platforms, and you'll probably see a continuation of like consolidation where we'll smaller, and then you'll have breakouts that will force the metaverse and others to rethink their strategy at times.
Yeah, I definitely agree. If nobody else has anything to add, we can move on to the next. Nope. Okay, so this one's a little more fun. But what is your favorite social channel and why? And then on the flip side, you can choose either of these questions. It's kind of a 2-in-1. What social media channel do you think is the strongest? Like, which one do you think is the leader in the industry, if you think there is one at all?
I'll go, because I think everybody, go ahead.
I would say that my favorite social media platform is probably Instagram. I'm a big fan of visual storytelling, and I think that's along with other things, it's Instagram's jam. I think that across the accounts that I have worked on, it's been the strongest platform, and obviously we've have a reach in Facebook and Twitter, and some accounts have reach in TikTok as well. But I would say personally, my favorite is Instagram. Yeah, and I think there's just so many different, with all the different additions and updates and stuff like that, they're really becoming more all-encompassing, as everyone was talking about before, where the future of social media is headed. I think I've seen Instagram become more encompassing, and also I would say that I enjoy the engagement. It's a tie between Twitter and Instagram as far as engagement, but like I said, I really do enjoy the visual storytelling aspect of it, so I would lean toward Instagram.
I knew I should have cut you off, Rebecca. I'd like to go on that. No, I'm just kidding. That was look, I would say I obviously am a big fan of what we're doing, but I like I've mentioned, I think Twitter is up there for me as if I think about what I use on a daily basis. Twitter is pretty high up in terms of like staying up to date with what's going on and exposing yourself to diverse perspectives and different, I would say ideas around common themes. But I think it comes back to everything has its place. Like I spend my fair share of time on Instagram. I spend a lot of time messaging with friends and old college buddies on Snapchat. So I think the reality is you kind of start to see like they all represent something different in every life. I think it'll be interesting to see as we expand and like the growth of the metaverse and the growth of just how every platform wants to, again, further its own ecosystem, who has the capacity to do it and who is asking their users to do something that's very unnatural. And that's where I think you'll start to see some, maybe some breakage from a consumer perspective. But yeah, I think Twitter's up there for me from just a personal usage.
I can go. I would say my favorite is TikTok, Matt. I could spend like an hour and a half. I get the ads. It's like, you should probably stop. Like you've been on for an hour and a half. I get sucked into like the live streams. I've watched like ghost hunting. I've watched tarot card readers. Like it's pretty wild, like the different things that pop up. But it just like sucks you in. But from like a paid advertising perspective, I'd say Facebook is still kind of the Facebook. When I say Facebook, I mean Facebook and Instagram together. That's how they're bought through the self-serve platforms. So they kind of mean the same thing when I'm talking about them. But Facebook, Instagram, I think is like kind of the leader in performance advertising across all the social channels, just because they're creepy and have access to lots of data primarily. I would say the second would, the ones I've tested and seen work, as also Snapchat has worked really well for some of my advertisers. They have like unique ad units, like non-skip commercials. You can create lenses and filters, and they have really strong audience and geo-targeting capabilities. So I would say in terms of like performance advertising media, I'd say Facebook and Snapchat are probably the top two, in my opinion.
It's really interesting to hear y'all's opinions, or at least from me, because I'm like hearing answers that I didn't expect. Like I would not have expected Snapchat to be on the list, but it makes sense. So let's put a pin in that question. Blake Hopkins asked a question in the chat, so I'm going to read it and then anyone can feel free to answer. So Blake says, I'm 19 and I'm trying to explore careers in the social media industry. I've been relatively successful on Instagram as I'm growing 5 different accounts, one of which is over 50,000 followers. What should I be doing now to set myself up for success in the future if I were to pursue this industry?
This kind of goes hand in hand with the last question too, but one of my favorite platforms too is TikTok, and it's because you can, I feel like that's the one platform where the algorithm helps you whenever you're posting organic content. So I'm not sure exactly what his 5 different accounts are about. Maybe it's about getting a job, or maybe it's about him talking about his own social media expertise, but sharing some of that content and creating your own lane on TikTok is the quickest way that I've seen people to reach new audiences. So if you are trying to grow and develop a brand per se, or, a creator profile or whatever it may be, if that's what those 5 accounts are, I would say begin sharing your content also to TikTok. Hopefully I got brownie points there with Matt, but because that is the platform that I've seen for all of my artists that I work with. You can be very niche in what you post, or you can be very broad, and every piece of content reaches you to a new audience, because that algorithm truly is something that's like working with you to push out your content. Hopefully that kind of answers the question.
I would add on, I think that's a great piece of advice. I would add on a couple other pieces too. Well, one is congrats, like you were way ahead of me when I was 19 already thinking about this stuff. I think that there's kind of two things that I would recommend. So one is that for those who may not be aware, portfolios and like personal websites are basically ways to showcase your work and your thought processes are very big in this industry. So if you already have such a strong experience that I know that you're building up more, I think that what's going to help you stand out to employers is exactly how you actually package that. So being able to possibly make a portfolio site for yourself, or even like a resume that succinctly shows like what your main goal was, what were your clients like main KPIs and goals, and what specific things did you do to get there, and what was your iterative process too, because I think that this kind of ladders into the second thing, but also diversity in the type of work that you do is also going to be key. So were you working with influencers? Were you working with several different types of categories, like a pet food brand, then a coffee brand? The more diversity that you have in your work, it's going to be able to show employers that A, like you can pretty much handle anything that's given to you. And then B, which I would argue is more important, is that you're going to figure out what you like doing the most so that you can actually lean into that more. Right now is a really great time to test a bunch of things while you're young, and while you have more of that freedom. And next thing you know, like let's say you do this for another year or so, you build up those portfolio. One is like now you have amazing projects to show people. And then two is you're like, you know what, out of all these projects that I had, these were the two that I really liked. So I know that, let's say working on these coffee brands or these CPG brands were really amazing. That is going to help me ladder up into what internships or what companies I actually try to apply for, so that you're going to be able to take a really good first step once you kind of break in after college if you're in university right now.
Awesome. Blake, I hope that helped. And there is another question. And this person says, I'm an advertising major with no social media accounts. Do I need to develop an online presence in order to be successful in the ad and marketing industry, especially as it becomes more digitalized?
I mean, I can jump in there. So I would say like, it's not, if your concern is I don't have social media accounts, and so I'm not discovered, and that's the only way to find a career. I would definitely make sure you're prioritizing like building out, and it's similar to what Armando had mentioned, like making sure that you're representing yourself for the professional outreach. But I think it's more important to just like have an understanding of what's happening on each of those platforms. And even I work at TikTok, I'm on every social platform, not because like I love them all the same, but because I want to make sure that I'm aware of what works well, what doesn't work well, how brands and people are showing up and scaling their business there. So I think, you can do that in some capacity without having an account, or at least, but I'd recommend at least like spending some time with it. I do think, as you've heard from a lot of the folks here, like it is an increasingly growing piece of where advertising, at least in the digital landscape, is going to be focused on. So understanding what works well, what doesn't, understanding some of the tools and the ways to drive specific outcomes through their paid or through their organic products is important. That doesn't mean you need to be creating content on all of them, but having a sense, maybe even just as a viewer or a passive viewer on them, is probably important.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. Okay, so switching gears a little bit, less about social specifically, but more about your journeys to the industry. I know a lot of us are probably upperclassmen. Some of us are younger underclassmen, and still don't necessarily know what we want to do, but a lot of us are still looking for jobs. And so what internships and work experiences did you have, whether in college or after college, that were the most beneficial to you, that helped you decide like where you wanted to go?
I can go first. I had a few internships. I did the Y&R internship over the summer in New York, and that made me really realize I wanted to get into the industry. That was probably the main one, but I would say what helped me get my first job wasn't actually any of my internships. It was having taken the media course that was part of the advertising curriculum. So I think it was, I don't know if it's still Advertising 360, but there was Dr. Childers' Advertising 360 class that just taught like the basics of media advertising, like CPMs and reach frequency and strategy and things like that. Talking about those projects that we did in addition, in addition to our campaigns class at the end of the curriculum, that's really what sold me into my first job. So I would try to make the most of the classes as much as you can and use that when you're in your interviews talking about yeah, what you want to do.
Awesome. Okay, so I said we are going away from social, but there's another question. So we're going to go back to social. So the question is, while you're developing your social media branding strategies, what are your considerations in regard to a future crisis situation for your clients and their services and or products?
I can chime in a little bit. This was something we, both at TikTok currently, but especially at my time at Twitter, was something that we were constantly asked or working with our brands on, how do you prepare? What's your strategy should, either a crisis that involves your brand, your brand goes viral for the wrong moments, maybe is the right example that we would talk about. I mean, the reality is like there's usually some level of contingency plan that you would expect on a platform by platform basis, depending on what your brand voice or your brand goals are for that platform. So on Twitter, for example, some brands use it as Wendy's is a good example. It's all humor for Wendy's on. So if there are things that are going on in the world that aren't humorous or their brand is not, it's a serious situation, Wendy's goes dark. They stay away from it. They don't engage. They let it blow over. If it's something that's like maybe a misrepresented scenario and they can spin it with their tone in a way that they feel is authentic to their brand, they lean into it. More often than not, I think, we had this situation actually is for those of you on TikTok, there was a West Elm Caleb scenario where a member of West Elm's staff was outed for maybe not being the best guy. And West Elm came to us and said, what should we do? And like, we had a couple of different scenarios, ones where they could address it head on or be quiet and let it blow over. And more times than not, like even that, the response, if it is a serious and it is a crisis, it's hard to thread that needle, and it's better to kind of like pull back and let the dust settle versus try to like truly lean in and make it work if you don't have the right to do so. Some brands do. Some brands say, hey, we're going to address this head on, and we can apologize and we can show a path of how we plan to fix or address if it's in their capacity. But usually it's a developing contingency plans based on the tone and your brand voice for that specific outlet.
Anyone else? Okay, let's keep going. Okay, so back to kind of talking about your jobs and your experiences. We got a little bit of advice on, what's helpful when looking for a job and getting a job outside of just internships, because I know especially for like people in my grade and below, internships have been harder to come by. But one question is, what was one of your favorite campaigns that you worked on for your brand and what made it so special? And this question came from Sydney.
I can go ahead just because it actually just happened. And so at Prairie Dell, the agency that I work for, one of our clients is Mini USA, and that's the account that I work on, one of the accounts. And we just launched a Mini Lovers campaign, and it was a Valentine's Day specific campaign. And it was so much fun to work on. I don't know if anyone's seen it, but it was really just sort of ramping up the tone of Mini. Our idea centered around, Mini's not a car that you like, it's a car that you love. And it was all about taking the day of love and really having, mini lovers express their love for their car. And we had a lot of fun with the copy. The writers were definitely enjoying themselves, seeing how far, they can push the brand voice and tone. So that's one that has stuck out in my mind. The live team was that worked on it was, exceptional in the copy and in the writing. And it was just so much fun to see the response that we got on social media, just because that's where, the campaign lived. There was no paid advertisement spots. It was all organic. And so to see the engagement coming back to us, we just had so much fun with it. And we're really excited to, or the client wants to carry it into next year and see what else we can do with it. See, where else we can take that Valentine's Day campaign. So yeah, that was one that stuck out in my mind.
I saw that one, Rebecca. It was fun. Madison, I'm going to make you answer.
I guess it would only be right since it's my sister's question. I could always call her after an answer.
But then the rest of us want to get to learn.
Yeah, true. I work on a lot of different artists. And so there are a lot of different campaigns going at once, whether it be we're really pushing for a tour, we're pushing for a particular sound on TikTok and Reels, we're pushing for an album. There's a lot that's going on at once. One of my favorite ones that I've worked on was for an artist named Riley Green. And he is very authentic and true to himself. So it's really just an ongoing campaign that started by him being like, you know what, I'm tired of doing these like perfect, pristine photo shoots. We're gonna brand everything around my debut album, which is different around here. We do everything different around here, and we are out here. And that's his brand. And it's an ongoing campaign, but it's been cool to see how many people truly relate to that go to his shows, that buy his merch, that have converted, and they are those lifetime fans. So, we really started to see that like once we finally really leaned into that side of him. And once we kind of just said like, okay, like let's lean into this hunting and lifestyle side of you. Let's work with these brands that are interested in working together. Let's focus on this audio piece on TikTok. Let's reach out to the people that are posting with it, see if they want to be invited to the show. It's been a really great way to connect with his fans, like on a deeper level that isn't really planned per se. Or it doesn't seem as planned. So that's, I guess I could say that is a campaign for my brand, but really it's just building up his brand in general. And that's the campaign. And that's been a great one to work on.
Awesome. Those are both super cool. And there is another question. So this question says, do you think every brand should be on all social media platforms? I currently intern for a restaurant group and they're not on TikTok and are pretty quiet on Twitter. Do you think I should try to push to get on TikTok? How would you approach this in my position as just an intern for the marketing team?
Well, I'll give you the TikTok answer, and then I'm sure Stephen and some of these other folks have more strategic and less biased approaches. I would say it's not required, right? Like I think you have to understand like what is the benefit and the outcome. And I think, there's the resource that it will require to have a presence. There's investments that come with creating content and doing it at a, and even the staffing that's required to manage accounts, post, respond, all of those things. So you have to understand, like, do we have the resources and do we have the capacity to take on all of them? There's plenty of brands that have been super successful by just figuring out Facebook, right? And vice versa. I think what we talk about is like, is the audience or your desired customer and on TikTok? And do you have a better way to reach them? Are they more leaned in and engaged? And is that where they're showing up? I think the goal should be, your brand should be where your customers are and engaging with them the way they're engaging. And if we believe that's the case, and then yeah, we should be on TikTok. We should find out, by listening. And I think, Madison, the example you talked about where, people using the sound that you're trying to seed out, that's a great focus group. Like how are they using it? How are they even speaking about your brand? What we tell a lot of folks is your brand is probably on TikTok, even if you're not on TikTok from a brand perspective. If your customers are there, they're usually talking, they're creating with your brand in mind. So I'd start there, start to understand, like, are their customers talking? Are they doing reviews? Are they showing like their favorite meals? And if so, then you start to have an understanding of what type of content that aligns to the brand you work on or the brand you work for is resonating on the platform. And then determine if you have the bandwidth to scale that.
Yeah, I would echo that because I think like that's a really good point in terms of finding, this was something I struggled with actually in my social media internships, because like sometimes when I had my early social media internships, it'd be like, oh, like we're not on Instagram, we're not on some of these platforms, like we should be on there. And I think that the key thing is like Matt was saying, just to assess the purpose and what is actually going to be kind of that catalyst to create the customer change that you want. So a really good example is like when I worked with, I was interviewing actually somebody one time, and they were a social media intern for like a moving company, like somebody you hire to move your furniture. And there was a social media intern, and what they had found was they had tried a bunch of different platforms and nothing really worked for them, because like, I don't know about you, but I don't really go follow moving van companies on TikTok. Like that's just the nature of it. What they found though, what the social media intern did was they like put all of their effort for like the last like month and a half of the internship into getting Google reviews and into finding fun ways to get Google reviews. Because when you're looking for moving and furniture, you look for Google, like you search on Google, you check out what are the ones that are having really good reviews, and then you find those types of platforms as well. And that's where they found actual success, not only in terms of like brand recognition, but true business results. They were getting a ton more signups actually for their moving service. And I think that, if the question is like more so of just like, oh, we're not on this one platform, but we're on everything else, if you have the bandwidth, that's awesome. But I think that this is also like a really cool opportunity to kind of think a little bit outside the box and be like, okay, like think about myself as a customer. Like I don't go on necessarily, like I might look at Wendy's or McDonald's on Twitter because they're funny, but like I don't go there to shop because they're already top of mind. If it's like a lesser known company, like how do I really get in front of the right people who are hungry and looking for food? And that's a really interesting way to get into different aspects of social as well.
The other thing to consider too before, suggesting to hop on another platform if you're a social media intern or if you're, working in it, is it's so important now more than ever to be authentic and seem authentic and keep that brand voice. And I think we've probably all seen like brands or certain accounts get absolutely roasted on like TikTok or Twitter because they try to get on there and it's just not authentic to them and it's not authentic to the platform or who they're trying to reach. So the worst thing you really want to do is have a PR crisis because some of the audience that you're reaching is like calling you out for being on a platform that you're excited about being on without reading the room of how that platform operates in a typical environment.
Solid point. Okay, so we have two more questions. So we'll start with Abby's. So Abby says, because social media has become so ubiquitous, do you think it's a skill to have in whatever field you go into? I know you all work specifically with advertising and social media, but how do you think these platforms are important for students going into other careers? I'm not qualified to answer, so.
I'll jump in real quick. So I think the reality is it's a representation, the way you show up on social media, the way you engage in social media, is a representation of your brand. And I think if you can create an authentic, representation of yourself, whether that's on TikTok, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on any of these platforms, like it's important to understand the connections and the utility that exists within each of them. I don't think it's, again, similar to the brand per like example before, like if you qualify like how this, what this does for you. And some of them might just be to bring joy and you need it as a disconnect. I know that's what a lot of people use TikTok for. But I do think that the reality is, news on Twitter can impact the stock market, and they're very closely tied. Everything is happening, and these are the platforms in which a lot of those conversations and news is being shared or broken. And so it's important to understand the way in which the world and like not just brands but industries are leveraging them. What happens on the metaverse may be changing what happens in the real world in some form, and so it doesn't require you to be experts across all of them or know them simply from an advertising perspective, but to recognize like where each excels, what each's purpose is, and how like maybe industries outside of advertising and social are playing in them is even a better understanding of what value they can bring to the world and to you as you explore what's next for you in your career.
Awesome. So one more question from a student, and then I'm going to ask a wrap-up question. But Alexandra asked, because working in social is so new recently in the past, like so many years with digital marketing, do you find yourself making up the rules as you go? And what have you learned about, social media and digital marketing in that time?
I can go first. It's a tough thing to answer because it's almost like a tough pill to swallow. You always have, your best practices. You always have what you think is going to work best. You always have like, use this tool in this way, use it this long before the launch, whatever. But you're always going to see that scenario that just performs like amazingly, that goes against all of the rules. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily making it up as you go, but I think it's, in my job and in my industry, it's having a really good, deep understanding of the brand or the creator or the musician and understanding like what is going to truly work best for them. And so it's, again, not making it up as you go, but it's being really aware of what other similar brands or what other similar artists are also doing and kind of taking tidbits of information from those to be able to pull into your own campaign and make it their own. But I will say a lot of it is kind of just, try whatever comes to mind or whatever the person is open for. And until you figure out what works and what doesn't, it is a little bit of trial and error for that particular brand or artist or creator or whoever it may be.
Just like life. I feel like life is trial and error. But to close up, and this can relate to a career field, it can relate to school, it can relate to life, but if you could leave all 83 of us with one piece of advice, what would it be?
I'll go again. Connect with everyone and anyone that you meet and follow up with people, and be nice and just reach out without any sort of goal in mind. You might be looking for a job, but reaching out, just saying like, hey, this is what I'm interested in. Do you know anybody? Would you want to get coffee? Would I have one specific question that I just want you to answer? That goes so much longer than, I don't know, like asking for a job or just applying and saying, hey, I sent in my resume or whatever. But building relationships is probably the best takeaway that someone has ever given me as a piece of advice.
I completely agree with Madison. I ended up in the current position that I'm in just through a soft tie from a mutual connection. And yeah, you really never know where those connections are going to get you. really just, it's important to build your network. But I would say, another piece of advice, and I guess this might be social media specific, is just to be agile in your career, in your approach, be flexible. If you're not already, social media will force you to be both of those things. So yeah, really just, like I said, be flexible with meeting new people, with your, strategic approach, with your engagement approach. Yeah, and I think it's a good tool to have, career and otherwise.
Yeah, I would echo that as well. I think that the be flexible, one thing I would always say is, prioritize growth over money. Look, when you have opportunities, if you're going to grow and learn more or get paid a little less, like it's always beneficial to have a broader, deeper, more diverse skill set. And I think it requires that flexibility that Rebecca talked about, to say like, all right, I'm gonna take some chances, but yeah, prioritize growth above all else.
This is a hard one, but I would say make the most of your college experience. I know when I was at UT, I tried to I wasn't part of ad club. I tried to go on the New York trip. I don't know if that's laughing, but New York trip, internships, try to make the most of your college experience. Because I think that'll really help you guys get that first job. It's the hardest one. Once you get the first job, once you get in the door, it's a lot easier to go other places and explore other parts of the industry. But yeah, I guess my advice would be make the most of your college experience.
I think my advice, no professor told me this, and I tell it a lot to people, is think short term when it comes to your happiness. So I remember being in college, you're thinking where do I want to be in 3 years when I graduate, in 10 years, what's going to make me happy then? And my professor told me, well, if you think about what's going to make you happy in 10 years, guess what? You're not going to be happy until about 10 years from now. And he had told me to just think about what I want to do, what would make me happy a year from now, what do I want to be telling myself that I'm doing in a year, and just go towards that. And then what you're going to find is 10 years on the way through, you're going to be happy for 10 years, year after year after year, and you're probably going to be more agile, more flexible, and just live a better life, to be honest, probably. So I think that, it is kind of stressful to think about the future sometimes, but think about and lean into what truly makes you happy and what truly gives you energy. And even if that changes, that's okay.
That was all some really good advice. And I just wanted to thank you all again so much for taking the time out of your evening to come and speak with us. You guys had some really great things to say, and I know I learned a lot. So yeah, feel free to hop off, and we really appreciate it. So I hope you all have a wonderful week and a wonderful weekend.
Thanks, Kate.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Bye,
Thanks,
y'all.
everyone.